Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Friday morning, talking all the top plays for tonight's 9-game slate around the NBA. A couple quick reminders before we dig in to the slate. My Twitter handle at Brent Hyden1, my Patreon handle, all that good stuff is in the description down below. If you're not already subscribed to my content package, which is projections, daily stat breakdowns, Discord, and all that good stuff, you can send me a direct message on Twitter to find out how you can get access to that content for one affordable one-time price, or you can head over to my Patreon page and check out the monthly options that I have available for you there. Please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below. That also goes a long way to helping me produce more content each week. As I noted in the recording last Wednesday it was. In an attempt to keep this around 30 minutes, I'm not going to go as in depth with some of these games as I normally would, but don't fret. My notes that I provide to you guys each day has a ton of in-depth information that you can gloss over. It's all highlighted in yellow for you to see easily. You just have to pull up the document and scroll through it. But without further ado, let's head into the slate. The first game that we're going to talk about is Atlanta at Boston, and there is a lot of injury news in this one. Al Horford is out, Miles Plumlee is out, Taurean Prince is out, Alex Poitras is out, Jeremy Lin is questionable, Omari Spellman is out, Gershon Yabusele is out, Jaylen Brown is questionable for this game. Boston is 13-point favorites, 224.5 over under. A couple of notes for some hot players. Marcus Morris has scored 58 points on 21 of 36% shooting over his last 10 games. He's been on fire. Kevin Huerter has actually been pretty solid for the Hawks of late, and Trae Young also coming off a really solid game last time out. But looking at the Hawks side of this, normally I wouldn't have a ton of interest in the Atlanta Hawks tonight, given that there is a pretty decent chance they're just going to get their shit pushed in. But looking at it, without all these guys on the floor, if you take a look at the usage, John Collins, 27.4% usage rate, 1.33 fantasy points per minute. He's been stellar recently. Really consistent since returning from his injuries, averaging 47.3 fantasy points on 25 real points and 13.5 rebounds per game over his last four outings. He's topped 40 fantasy points in 4 straight, including a couple of tough matchups if you actually pull it up. The Mavericks, which is a pretty tough matchup, actually, and Denver, which is also a tough matchup. Really solid outings. And if he's going to be taking, double-digit field goal attempts, I mean, just 20 plus in the last 2. He's been over 40 fantasy points several games. Struggled against Boston. 30 minutes, 7 of 8 from the floor. Just didn't get the rebounds, but over the past 5 games, Boston is giving up 11 rebounds per game to opposing power forwards. So he is a little bit interesting. Kent Bazemore, a guy that I did highlight last time out against Dallas. He profiles as a decent option here as well, coming in with a 1.04 fantasy points per minute with all these injured guys off the floor, with a 24% usage rate. Again, it's not really a great spot for him, but he's just going to play a decent amount of minutes, take a decent amount of shots, and he can notch you these steals and blocks and things like that. So I actually have some interest in Kent Bazemore as a tournament option. Trae Young, a tournament option as well. In this spot. Looking at the Boston side of things, it definitely gets interesting. If you think Atlanta can keep this game close, Boston's very interesting here. Obviously, they are shorthanded as well. And that bodes really well for guys like Kyrie Irving, who has a 34% usage rate and averages 1.34 fantasy points per minute when you take Al Horford off the floor. It would be a really good spot for him. We know Atlanta really bad against point guards. They rank 26th in defensive efficiency against the position. Kyrie, it's absolute smash spot if he can just play the minutes. I mean, he had a good game against Atlanta last time these teams played. He just didn't play minutes. 19 minutes, 25 fantasy points. Boston put up like 45 points in the first quarter of that game, and it was all downhill from there for Atlanta. But Kyrie Irving, fine in tournaments. He's fine in cash if you think the game stays relatively close for 3 quarters. So I do have a lot of interest in him. The guy I have the most interest in would be Aaron Baines. I'm hoping that we get news that he's going to play, a few extra minutes. He got 16 against Washington in his first game back after being injured a little for a few games. If he's going to get over 20 minutes in this spot, I really, really like Aaron Baines as a value option here. We know Atlanta just really bad against centers. They're giving up 48 rebounds per game, 16 second chance points. And if you look against this Hawks team last time these teams faced off, he only played 23 minutes, but still put up 35 fantasy points because he had 16 points and 9 rebounds. He has that potential in limited minutes again tonight. And at 4,200 on DraftKings, and 3,900 on FanDuel would be one of my favorite value options if we get news that he's going to play, like 20 to 24 minutes tonight. Marcus Morris continues to dominate, averaging 20 points on and 2.5 assists and 6.3 rebounds on 53% shooting over the last four, averaging 1.11 fantasy points per minute and a 26% usage rate without Al Horford. This is a really, really good spot for Marcus Morris. This is a good spot for Jaylen Brown and Gordon Hayward as well. Marcus Smart, Terry Rozier, all of these names come into play here. I did highlight some reasons why I like a few of those guys in my notes, so be sure to check that out. Moving on to the Knicks at Charlotte, a game we just saw a couple nights ago. Charlotte 11-point favorites in this game, 226.5 over under. We're going to look at the New York side of this game first because there is some injuries to talk about. Lance Thomas is doubtful, Trey Burke is out, Alonzo Trier is out, Damian Dotson is questionable, and Ron Baker is no longer with the team. Taking a look at the projections, you can see actually that some of these Knicks guys actually project to be pretty solid options. Kevin Knox being the one that I have the most interest in, still just too cheap on DraftKings at 4,800, 5,600 on FanDuel is fine. Kevin Knox has just been outstanding of late, playing really, really well. If you take a look at his game log, I expect him to be really popular, and I'm fine with that. But coming off, back-to-back really, really solid games here. One against Charlotte, one against Cleveland. Double-digit field goal attempts at each. Got you the double-digit rebounds. Fizdale has been talking about how he has been playing really well. Had a bad stretch against Boston and Brooklyn, but again, in a few games before that, was playing really well. 24% usage rate over the last 4 games, which is really, really appealing here for Kevin Knox. As far as the rest of the Knicks go, I do like Tim Hardaway Jr. once again. Charlotte does struggle against shooting guards. He has a 27% usage rate on the season. It's a pretty good spot here for him as well. And then not Cody Zeller, I was looking at the wrong side of this. Enes Kanter, someone that I have interest in. Same with Moutier and Noah Vonleh. It is a revenge game for him. He continues to be an inconsistent option, to say the least, but he's still getting the minutes. He's just not always producing, but he does have potential and upside in this spot. So Noah Vonleh is someone that I have interest in as well. I did highlight some reasons why I like Moutier in the notes, as well as Frank Ntilikina, who is someone that is definitely in play, especially on FanDuel, but in play on DraftKings as well, has been worked back into the rotation and playing really well over his last 2 games. Looking at the Charlotte side of things, there is a lot to like here as well. That starts with, obviously, Kemba Walker, who is coming off back-to-back really strong outings, one of those against this Knicks team. That one was in Madison Square Garden, though, so there is a narrative, I guess. But 60 fantasy points against Detroit, 50 fantasy points against the Knicks last time out. Kemba Walker averaging 25.7 points over his past 3 games. The Knicks 22nd defensive efficiency to point guards. They're allowing them to shoot 37% from 3 on the season and 65% at the rim. 42% of Kemba's shots are 3-pointers, 32% of his shots coming at the rim. This is a really, really good spot for Kemba Walker. I do like him as a cash and tournament option. Birthday game for Nick Batum. There are some notes as to why I think he is in play outside of just the birthday narrative. If you check out the breakdown, I do really like Zeller in the spot. Again, I highlighted him last time these teams played, and he had a really solid outing. He continues to be a fantastic cash game option that you can build around every single night. Does take a decent amount of shots at the rim, so this would be a good spot to use him as the Knicks do struggle to defend the rim. You can also look at Marvin Williams, who profiles to be a pretty solid option here tonight. Moving on, Washington at Brooklyn. This is a game that I do have a lot of interest in. This one might take a little bit longer to break down, but Washington or Brooklyn 1.5 point favorites, 227.5 over under. We do know obviously Karis LeVert is out and Dwight Howard is out. Otto Porter is questionable. I kind of expect him to play in the spot, and then Alan Crabb is questionable. Brooklyn coming off a solid stretch of games recently. Upsetting Philly and Toronto. They did just recently sign Spencer Dinwiddie to a new contract, which unfortunately does take away a little bit of a narrative that I had for Spencer Dinwiddie, but I still really like him in here. But looking at the Washington side of things first, if Otto Porter does come back tonight, I do have a lot of interest in him. 36% of his shots come in the mid-range, where Brooklyn's allowing opponents to shoot 42% on the season. They are pretty strong against power forwards if you look at their defensive efficiency numbers, but Otto Porter, a guy that I think would be really overlooked, and he's just really cheap. 5,800 in this spot is just really good for him. I do like him a significant amount against this team as a cash and tournament option, especially on DraftKings at just 5,800. FanDuel 6,800. Probably going to pass over there. As far as the rest of Washington goes, we did see John Wall play really well last game, coming in at 9,500. Played 41 minutes against Boston, put up 66 fantasy points. That's a little concerning that he just played 41 minutes, given that he has that foot issue. So I would leave him as a tournament play only. Bradley Beal, someone that we can look at in cash. At 7,900, that's a really solid price for him, and he's just consistently getting you upper 30s, low 40s most nights. So I have some interest in Bradley Beal. He's also playing a ton of minutes, and that just makes him really appealing. And you can definitely look at Markieff Morris, who is still a really good cash value, and Thomas Bryant and Oubre in GPPs. On the Brooklyn side, where I have the most interest in this game, it starts with Spencer Dinwiddie and D'Angelo Russell. Since LeVert went down with an injury, we know both these guys just dominating the usage. Russell 30.3%, Dinwiddie 25.3%. Russell averaging 19.4 points on like 18.6 field goal attempts per game, getting you some rebounds and assists as well. D'Angelo Russell in a really solid spot here, coming off a game where he only played 22 minutes against the Sixers. Started off really well, and Spencer Dinwiddie was the hot hand, so that's who got the minutes. But I have a lot of interest in D'Angelo Russell against a Washington team that is just putrid against point guards that are allowing them to shoot almost 40% from three. That is a pretty big boost to a guy that has taken like 4, 5, 6, 7 three-point attempts each night. Taking a look at the projections, he does project to be a pretty solid value. So does Spencer Dinwiddie, who is someone that you can definitely consider as well. Both these guys perfectly fine options. I lean towards Dinwiddie in cash and Russell in tournaments. Dinwiddie seems to be just a more reliable option here. Jarrett Allen projects to be a really solid option. However, I will caution, Washington is really bad against centers, but their penchant for going small does not necessarily bode well for Jarrett Allen, who traditionally struggles against small ball lineups or non-traditional big men, so he would be just tournaments only. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, a guy that has been really inconsistent this season, especially if you just take a look at his game logs. It's not pretty, but at 5K, I do have some interest in him. He's just really up and down. 16, 37, 21, 22, 11, 25. He's, like I said, he's just really up and down. He's playing sometimes 30 plus minutes, sometimes 22 minutes. It's just a matter of if he's playing really well or not. But this is a spot where I do expect him to be able to put up a really solid game, and I do really like him in tournaments. We do need to monitor the status of Allen Crabbe, it would be a pretty big boost to Joe Harris if Allen Crabbe is out. Joe Harris, 8 of 14 from 3-point range over his last 4 games. I do actually like him even if Allen Crabbe plays as a value option here tonight. Has been shooting, like I said, just shooting the ball really, really, really well, but would be a boost to his minutes with Allen Crabbe potentially missing this game. Moving on to Milwaukee at Cleveland. Milwaukee 10-point favorites in this one, 218.5 over under. We do have news that Tristan Thompson is out, and John Henson and Kevin Love are going to be out for quite a while, so nothing too new there. Looking at the Milwaukee side of things, Giannis has been struggling a little bit recently. Just one 20-point outing over his last 4 games, averaging just 17 points during that stretch. Obviously, I'm not going to hold that against him because if you look at a couple of these games, really tough opponents, Indiana, a really good rim protection team. Toronto, a really good rim protection team. Detroit, not a really good rim protection team, but he only played 26 minutes, so I'm going to let that one slide. Giannis in a fantastic spot against a Cavaliers team that is allowing opponents to shoot 69.3% at the rim. Giannis, who is taking 66% of his shots at the rim, should be able to absolutely feast here. I do really, really like him in this spot, coming in at 11K on DraftKings, 12K on FanDuel. Fantastic option in all formats. Brogdon, outside of last game, has been really, really, really consistent, and he continues to be one of my favorite cash game options night in and night out. He's 5,600 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel. Cleveland ranks 23rd in defensive efficiency to shooting guards. They're allowing 36.6% shooting on 3-point attempts, so that's a boost to Malcolm Brogdon. Again, like I mentioned last game, not very good. Only played 25 minutes against Indiana, 16 fantasy points, but double-digit points in the 3 games prior to that. Continues to be a guy getting you mid 20s, upward, sometimes lower 30s, but just a really, really, really good cash game option tonight. Middleton has really struggled with his shot recently. You can use him, Brolo, Bledsoe, and GPPs. Bledsoe has been on a little bit of a hot streak, 20 or more points in 4 of the past 6 games. Looking at the Cavaliers side of things, the backcourt is pretty healthy. Now that we have Rodney Hood, David Nwaba, all these guys back, and then we're throwing Matthew Dellavedova into the mix, doesn't really bode too well for anybody in this spot, but looking at a couple of these guys, Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson, 2 tournament options. Sexton averaging 21.4 points over his past 5 games. Jordan Clarkson actually has been really solid, 28 points off the bench last outing, his third 20-point effort in his past 6 games. Both of these guys take a lot of shots in the paint in the mid-range, where we've highlighted before, Milwaukee allowing 45.5% in the paint, 44.5% shooting in the mid-range. If you look, again, Clarkson taking 48% of his shots there, Colin Sexton 56% of his shots there, Rodney Hood 55% of his shots there, but it never feels good to try to count on Rodney Hood to actually do anything whenever he's on the floor. As you can see, dude plays like 31 minutes and can get you maybe 20 fantasy points most nights. So I would look at Sexton and Clarkson in tournaments. Both these guys pretty cheap options across the industry. Clarkson a little bit pricier than Sexton. Sexton going to play more minutes unless Clarkson gets just absolutely hot like he has a couple times recently and plays really well. He'll get a few extra minutes. But I have the most interest in Larry Nance once again. Just because he may not start whatever Larry Drew is doing there. I don't know. I don't really care if Larry Nance starts or not, but should get the bulk of the minutes at the center position against Milwaukee, coming off 33 minutes against the Knicks. Shot 1 of 5 from the floor, still put up like almost 40 fantasy points. Dude's just really, really active, constantly getting you these blocks and steals. Milwaukee 25 minutes, 16 points, 6 rebounds, a couple steals. Really solid outing there. Larry Nance Jr., a core option candidate here. I do like him, 6,200 on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel. More of a cash game option on DraftKings, more of a tournament option over on FanDuel. He does average 1.09 fantasy points per minute with Thompson off the floor. Chetty Osman, someone that you can look at in cash, especially if he starts at the 4, where I actually like him playing a little bit more. Looking at Indiana Philly, this game not terribly appealing unless injury news breaks the way that it possibly could. Philly 4.5 point favorites in this one. Jimmy Butler is questionable, Mike Muscala is questionable, and Kyle O'Quinn is questionable. Darn, Kyle O'Quinn. Miles Turner coming in hot, averaging 24.5 points over his last couple of games. Played really, really well with Oladipo returning last time out, but Thaddeus Young played really, really well with Oladipo coming back last time out as well. But looking at the Indiana side of things, Oladipo played 29 minutes in a night where he was supposed to play limited minutes. Still played 29, had 12 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists in that limited time. If his minutes climb over 30 tonight, which we should get word that if they're going to increase his minutes, makes for one of my favorite tournament options on the slate. He's just really cheap, 8,400 on DraftKings, 8,600 on FanDuel. Philly does rank 5th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards, but Oladipo just dominating usage, taking a ton of shots, just makes for a really, really, really good tournament option. If you're looking to get some cash game exposure or tournament exposure, don't hesitate to go back to Thaddeus Young in the spot. Philly allowing 22.3 points, 13 rebounds per game on 47% shooting, 2 power forwards, ranking them 25th in defensive efficiency. It's a spot that I've highlighted most of the season for power forwards against Philly. He's coming off a monster game, 57.75 fantasy points. He had 25 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 steals and blocks combined. He's notched double-digit rebounds in back-to-back games, 20-plus points in 2 of the last 3, playing really well, so I'm fine with him in all formats. You can look at Turner Sabonis in tournaments. Bojan, a fine cash option, continues to shoot really well and play really well. The Philly side of things, not terribly appealing unless Jimmy Butler is out. If Jimmy Butler is out, Joel Embiid with his 36% usage rate and 1.54 fantasy points per minute would come close to a very, very good cash and tournament option. Would be someone that I would almost lock into my lineups. Ben Simmons, 1.32 fantasy points per minute with Butler off the floor would also be someone that I would definitely consider. Outside of those guys, though, and outside of the situation where Jimmy Butler could sit, I don't have a ton of interest here. It's not really a spot that I want to attack too much. They're fine in tournaments. Simmons and Embiid are fine in tournaments if Butler plays. But I have more appeal in cash and tournaments if he sits. JJ Redick really the only option that I really like here. Coming in at 5,100 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. Indiana allowing opponents to shoot 37% from 3. 54% of his field goal attempts are 3-pointers. And if we look, JJ Redick continues, outside of one down game against Brooklyn, continues to just produce really, really well. I mean, 21 fantasy points against Detroit, not great, but I mean, at 5,100, he's just continuing to produce mid to upper 20s most nights. So he's fine in cash. Furkan Korkmaz would be interesting if Butler were to sit. Butler would be a tournament option if he were to play. Looking at the next game, Miami at Memphis. This game pretty quick and easy to talk about because there is really not a whole lot to like. This game is pretty ugly. Memphis 5.5 point favorites, just a 203.5 over under. Waiters is out. Whiteside is probable. Goran Dragic is listed out. Mike Conley probable. Parsons and Dylan Brooks are out. Justice Winslow coming off just 9 points on 4-12 shooting against the Jazz after averaging 23 points over his previous 3 games. Kyle Anderson coming off 12 rebounds against Portland for his 5th double-double of the season. And Josh Richardson continues to struggle with shooting just 30.3% over his past 8 games and has been below 40% in each of those contests. Winslow's fine. If you want to go back to the well here with him as a tournament option, just because he's going to get a few extra ball handling opportunities, and he has been on a little bit of a hot streak. He's 3rd on the team in fast break points. Memphis is, allowing 15.8 fast break points per game. He's still relatively cheap. So I don't hate going back to Justice Winslow at 5,200 on DraftKings. He is, let's see, pull up Miami here. He's 5,600 on FanDuel. It's just really not a spot where I don't want to use too much of Miami. Memphis coming in, they just allowed 83 points to Portland, held them to 36.6% shooting from the field. They've held like 6 teams under 90 points. Their defense is just playing really well. So just don't really see a reason to go here tonight. Like there's just so many better places to look. If you want to target anyone from the Memphis side of things, Conley is interesting. It is worth noting that he came out and said like he's still that hamstring is still bothering him, and he's afraid to do too much because he doesn't want to injure it. That's a little concerning, but he's someone that you can use in tournaments. Outside of that, Gasol's interesting as well. I talked about last game. They wanted to get him more field goal attempts, wanted to get him going. They got him the double-digit field goal attempts. Just wasn't very efficient, has not been very efficient recently. Did have 6 blocks. That's crazy against Portland. But Marc Gasol, a tournament option here. Maybe even cash. Jaren Jackson Jr., always a tournament option. Kyle Anderson, I think, is going to go overlooked here. And while it's not the best of matchups here for Kyle Anderson, he's just really cheap. And he continues to play a decent amount of minutes and put up a decent amount of fantasy points. Like he's going to get you 20 plus most nights. He's done that in 8 of his last 10 games. So Kyle Anderson's someone that you can look at in cash. Looking at Oklahoma City and Denver, Oklahoma City 2-point favorites in this one, 217 over under. Harris, Millsap, Barton all out. Jamal Murray is probable for this game. Not sure what Mike Malone's going to do at the power forward position. We saw Plumlee get the start last game. I think he's going to rotate Plumlee and Lyles as starters. We'll just have to wait and see how that works out, though. Nikola Jokic playing really well, has 4 double-doubles over his past 5 games, averaging 20.4 points, 10.6 rebounds, and 9.4 assists over that stretch of games. Obviously, we know he has increased usage with all these guys out. He has a 31% usage rate, averaging 1.65 fantasy points per minute whenever you take Harris, Millsap, and Barton off the floor. Paul George has been hot as well, averaging 30.5 points over his last 4 games, 25 points and 11 rebounds against the Pelicans last time out, his 9th double-double of the season. And Steven Adams, big Kiwi, 20 points against New Orleans, posted 4 20-point efforts in the past 5 games. Definitely an interesting spot for a few guys on both sides. Obviously, I mentioned Nikola Jokic has to be in consideration, especially for tournaments, given how well he's been playing recently with over 50 fantasy points in back-to-back games. Did struggle a little bit against OKC last time out. Only played 27 minutes. Didn't shoot very well. 0-7 from 3. I still really, really like him in tournaments. Obviously, just the sheer amount of usage and production that he's going to put up makes him really, really appealing. 22% of his shots come in the paint, where Oklahoma City is allowing 42% shooting. So there is obviously some room for success. Plumlee and Lyles are 2 value options here. Again, I mentioned I don't know what Mike Malone is going to do. He did start Plumlee last time out. Plumlee played 35 minutes, had a really, really solid game. He's just continually putting up really solid numbers in limited minutes. Even if you project him for like 22 to 24 minutes, the dude's averaging over a fantasy point per minute whenever you take all these guys out the floor. So 1.16 fantasy points per minute. So he's still a good option. I think you could use Plumlee and Lyles. Lyles 1.01 fantasy points per minute. You can use both of them. I mean, if you really, really want to, they're both really cheap and both should be able to, put up really solid games. Lyles, less than 20 minutes against OKC last time out, 23 fantasy points. Plumlee, 20 minutes, 30 fantasy points against OKC last time out. I do like both these guys, cash and tournaments. Murray and Monte Morris, excellent GPP options here. Murray has really struggled battling that shin injury. Not shooting the ball very well from 3, but he is getting some other peripheral stats to make up for it. You can use him in tournaments. He did have a really solid game against OKC last time out. Monte Morris, another really solid option. Juancho is someone that is definitely interesting, continues to put up solid outings as well, and is just really cheap. Obviously, a down game against Memphis, that was just a really, really bad matchup, but playing a ton of minutes, and that makes him appealing in this spot. So I do like Juancho in cash and tournaments. Torrey Craig and Malik Beasley. Two guys that I do have interest in, more so on FanDuel because you can drop their score if they don't perform. Torrey Craig, a guy that should get plenty of run here against Oklahoma City. They've been using him as a defensive specialist against opposing point guards, and he did a good job of limiting Russell Westbrook last time out. Torrey Craig could be a very, very, very good option here. I mentioned Paul George, who has been absolutely ridiculous recently, averaging 53 fantasy points with 27.8 points, 4.6 assists, 8.8 rebounds, and 2.4 steals over his last 5 games, shooting 51% from the floor, 42% from three. He's my guy from this game. Obviously, Russell Westbrook gets all the glory, triple double upside, blah blah blah. It's Russell Westbrook. You guys know he's a good basketball player, good fantasy player. But Paul George coming in at 9,100 continues to put up really solid performances, and he's a guy that I feel comfortable is going to get me upper 40s, maybe low 50s on a nightly basis. He's my guy from this game. But you can also look at Adams, who has, like I said, top 20 points in 3 straight games. Russell Westbrook, triple-double in 3 of his last 4. Jeremy Grant, someone that you can look at in cash. But Paul George, my guy here tonight. Toronto at Portland. Portland 3-point favorites in this game. Kawhi Leonard, questionable with that hip. Jonas Valanciunas is out. Norman Powell is out. Mo Harkless is probable. And Anthony Simons, oh no, he's questionable for this game. Darn. Lowry went 4 of 28 from the floor over a 4-game span before Kawhi Leonard went out. He shot 17 of 31 in the first 2 games of this road trip for Toronto. Lillard, coming off a down game, managed just 14 points into a string of 5 straight games, scoring at least 25. Nurkic, pulled down 10 rebounds last game, his 5th straight double-digit rebounding game. McCollum, coming off a hot game against Memphis, 28 points, averaging 28 points in 3 games since returning from that ankle injury, put up a big game against Memphis. The status of Kawhi is something that we have to keep an eye on. I kind of expect him to come back in this game, but we definitely need to monitor that news. If he suits up, he's one of my favorites, like 9K options on the slate. Portland, really, really bad against small forwards. They're 23rd in defensive efficiency. Kawhi with a 29% usage rate. Portland giving up 20.4 points to go along with 7.9 rebounds, 3 assists, 47% shooting, 44% from 3. Over the last 4 games that Kawhi has played, 50% shooting, 12 of 24 from 3, 7 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 3.8 steals and blocks, 28.8 points per game. This is just a really, really good spot for Kawhi Leonard if he's able to suit up, and I kind of think he does come back in this game. Someone that I have a lot of interest in tonight. You can easily put Kawhi Leonard or Paul George in your lineup on DraftKings. And if Kawhi plays, you can just pivot to Paul George. If Kawhi sits, you can pivot to Paul George. If Kawhi is out, you can pivot to, or if Kawhi plays, you can pivot to Kawhi Leonard or stick with Paul George. That just got really confusing for me. Danny Green, very, very interesting here. Portland really, really struggling against 3-point shooters, allowing 39% on above the break threes. 45% of Green's field goal attempts are above the break threes. Coming in at 4,600, it is a pretty solid spot here for Danny Green, who is coming off a solid game against the Warriors. Does struggle with some inconsistency, generally better whenever Kawhi Leonard is in the lineup. I don't know if Ibaka is going to remain in the starting lineup against Nurkic. Generally speaking, Nick Nurse has used Serge Ibaka in matchups against big men like Joel Embiid, but Greg Monroe could get in the lineup here, in the starting lineup tonight. We won't know that ahead of time. That being said, like, Monroe's still probably going to play 16, 18, 20 minutes in the spots. Would be a really, really, really good value option at 3,600 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel. I don't hate using Ibaka or Siakam here. Obviously, those two guys do get a boost, along with Kyle Lowry, if Kawhi Leonard is out. I'll cover that in Discord if we get news ahead of time. But Lowry just a tournament option for me. And if Kawhi Leonard plays, Siakam tournaments if Kawhi Leonard plays, Ibaka cash tournaments if Kawhi Leonard plays. Uh, I don't really want to attack Toronto with too much from Portland here. Dame is a perfectly fine tournament option here, coming in at 8,500 on DraftKings. That's pretty affordable for the upside that he does have. 8,900 on FanDuel. Um, he 41.5% of his possessions come in the pick and roll. Toronto allowing 0.97 points per possession in the pick and roll. CJ McCollum, as I mentioned, has been playing really well, coming off a big game against Memphis. Probably going to be popular. I think people chasing his big game. You can use him. I'm probably going to be looking elsewhere though. Aminu struggled against Memphis, but back-to-back 30-plus fantasy points game. Fantasy point outings prior to that, 30-plus in 5 of the last 7. Decent value cash option, I think. Aminu, 4,500 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. Been playing really well recently. Nurkic would just be GPPs. We could see him struggle in this spot, especially if Serge Ibaka gets a start. We could see him get pulled probably. We could see one of these games where he only plays like 23, 24 minutes compared to 30 minutes. So just a tournament option for me tonight. Last game of the night, Golden State at Sacramento. Golden State 8-point favorites in this one, 236.5 over under. This is probably going to be a game where there's going to be some ownership. Sean Livingston is out. Iguodala is questionable for this game. There is a lot to like. Curry coming off a down game, slumped to 10 points on 3 of 12 shooting on Wednesday, but 32.5 points per game averaged over the 4-game winning streak before losing to Toronto. I have a lot of interest in Golden State side of things. Obviously, I mentioned he did struggle in that last game, but was shooting 48% from the field, 51% from 3 over the last 5 games prior. Sacramento is pretty tough on 3-point shooters, but I do like Curry in tournaments, especially on FanDuel at 9,400. On DraftKings at 10-2, I'm probably looking elsewhere. Clay, very, very appealing tournament option here. Sacramento allowing 27.6 points on 46.5% shooting and 36.5% 3-point shooting to shooting guards on this season. Klay Thompson, 6,200 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. One of my favorite tournament options of the night, does project to be a really solid option here. If you take a look at the projections, we do have Klay Thompson at 37 fantasy points on DraftKings. Obviously a better option there because of the 3-point bonus, but 35 fantasy points over on FanDuel. Draymond Green, really, really, really good option, 6,800 across the industry tonight. Going to be a guy that is probably going to be a core play for me on DraftKings because I can plug him in at center where I'm not terribly in love with a whole lot. But just too cheap. Has not played particularly well since returning, but Sacramento just trash on the boards. They're giving up 47.4 rebounds per game, 14.5 second chance points, 52.2 points in the paint. Draymond Green should absolutely crush in this spot. Kevin Durant, if I'm paying up for a stud from this game, 10-3 on DraftKings, 10K on FanDuel, he would be the guy. Most of his shots come at the rim, paint, or mid-range, where Sacramento is allowing 66.2% shooting, 41% shooting, and 41.7% shooting. Jerebko and Looney would be okay value punts in this spot. Jerebko still playing a decent amount of minutes, 20 plus most nights, and with Livingston out, that shortens the rotation. If Iguodala misses, that would secure some more minutes for Jerebko, and then Kevon Looney continues to be the starting center and would be someone that I would expect to get right around 20 minutes tonight. Looking at the Sacramento side of things, De'Aaron Fox projects to be a really, really solid option here tonight. Going up against the Golden State Warriors, he is just 7K on DraftKings, 7,600 on FanDuel. Very, very, very good tournament option here. Golden State is really tough, is pretty tough against point guards, but they're giving up like 9 assists per game to point guards, 66% shooting at the rim, where Fox takes 36% of his shots. I do have a lot of interest in De'Aaron Fox in tournaments tonight. Buddy Hield, interesting in tournaments as well. Not going to draw a very good matchup, but Golden State allowing 1.19 points per possession in transition. He's operating in transition like 25% of the time, so I do have some interest in Buddy Hield in the spot. Bogdan, 23% usage rate on the season, perfectly fine in tournaments, maybe even cash. 6K on DraftKings, 6,300 on FanDuel. He would be someone that I would consider using in this spot to get some exposure to Sacramento. Yogi Ferrell found his way into the rotation, and they're talking about giving him some more minutes. You can use him on FanDuel as a value option, 3,800 as one of your drop the score candidates. I'm not going to chase the Bielitsa monster revenge game, but he is still pretty cheap. So he is someone that you can look at. Marvin Bagley, if I'm getting exposure to anyone from this game, it's going to be Marvin Bagley at 5,700. Continues to put up solid numbers when given the minutes. I expect him to get a decent amount of run here tonight. Marvin Bagley, the guy that I have the most interest in from the Sacramento side of this game. That doesn't. I didn't hit the 30-minute mark. 41 minutes, but still pretty solid. I will be back tomorrow to cover tomorrow's 6-game slate. I should be back tomorrow. We'll see. But good luck in all your contests tonight. And make sure you keep an eye on Discord, where I will cover any injury news that happens to come out.